What is the Workers' Rights Board? Now you're asking me to remember. The Workers' Rights Board was a community. The Workers' Rights Board is a community board, a variety of community leaders, people in the advocacy space and the faith space, all who care about the dignity of work in the District of Columbia, and Jobs with Justice pulled the Workers' Rights Board together as a way to directly connect with the community, hear from the community, and help set the agenda for Jobs with Justice, to make sure that that agenda was rooted in diverse voices from the community. So it was through my work at the DC Fiscal Policy Institute that I ran into DC Jobs with Justice, when over and over again for campaigns for economic justice, when coalitions would get together, DC Jobs with Justice would be there, whether it was fighting for a living wage to make sure that people who worked for government contractors in the district got paid a decent wage, and that companies couldn't win DC contracts by lowballing the wages that they paid their workers, or whether it was the first fight for paid sick and safe days to make sure that every working person in the district had paid sick time and time to take off when they were a victim of domestic violence. Through that work, I just got to know DC Jobs with Justice well, and that is how I ultimately became connected with the Workers' Rights Board, and was honored to become a member of that Workers' Rights Board to further the community-driven work of Jobs with Justice. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always been impressed at how DC Jobs with Justice's work is grounded in relationship with communities, people who are marginalized and pushed to the side by our economy and treated unfairly, and takes their experiences and their voice and then translates that into advocacy campaigns, into directly connecting workers with policymakers, so that when it's a fight for a restaurant worker who has no paid sick time, it's not an abstract concept to talk with a policymaker about. It's a real worker telling a real policymaker about their problems and why they need the district leaders to make policy decisions to make their lives better. That is absolutely not the case. I mean, too often the hearings and the policy process in the district is dominated by the voices of advocates, people who may care a lot and know a lot, but aren't the people with lived experience. And that really is one of the ways that DC Jobs with Justice is unique, is that, number one, their work is grounded in hearing directly from affected communities, and then taking those voices and bringing those people into the Wilson Building, whether it's for a rally, to testify at a hearing, or a meeting directly with a policymaker. DC Jobs with Justice is unique in directly connecting workers with the policymakers who need to hear about what their experiences are like and how the economy and district policy is not treating them right. One of the examples of the impact of Jobs with Justice that really sticks with me the most was how they stood up and stood with day laborers who were hanging outside the Home Depot in DC just trying to get work and support their families, people who had been pushed aside in the economy by their immigration status and other factors, people that most others just walked by and ignored. Jobs with Justice saw the dignity in those workers and their need for a safe place and a fair wage, and a way to work and support their families. So Jobs with Justice was there to protect those workers against wage theft and to make sure they had a safe, dry, easy way to find work in an economy that really was not treating them well at all. There aren't enough organizations who really focus on DC residents who are most marginalized, most neglected, most oppressed in our economy, whether that's day laborers or street vendors or people who can't get unemployment insurance because of their immigration status. And DC Jobs with Justice connects with those workers, fights for those workers, brings those workers' voices to our policymakers in a way that really no other organization does. I'm just deeply impressed by Jobs with Justice's commitment to the most marginalized workers, to standing with them and standing for them and making a difference in their lives. You know, there have been notable ways that the city has become a more humane place to work, things that Jobs with Justice has fought for, like a $15 minimum wage, like paid family and medical leave, like paid sick days for every single person who works in the district. At the same time, there's just too often abuse of workers that goes on because of strong corporate power in the city, whether it's employers who just literally do not pay their workers what they're required to pay, and a city that doesn't care and doesn't enforce and doesn't look into wage theft and does not hold companies accountable to pay their workers what they're owed. Jobs with Justice is there as a protector of workers to fight against wage theft and to hold the district accountable to actually holding employers accountable. Unfortunately, it's too easy for employers to actually not follow the law and not pay workers what they are owed, and that most often happens with our most marginalized low-wage workers. And Jobs with Justice doesn't tolerate that. So Jobs with Justice is there to stop wage theft, to hold the district government accountable for looking into employers and then making sure those employers actually follow the law, pay their workers, give them the leave that they're due, and give them the dignity that they're supposed to have as workers. I remember just a year ago being at a rally organized by DC Jobs with Justice at Freedom Plaza across the street from the Wilson Building, targeting the mayor and the DC Council, along with workers who had lost their jobs in the pandemic through no fault of their own, but couldn't get help from the city because they were undocumented, because they were workers for cash, like sex workers. Again, some of the most ignored workers in our society. And Jobs with Justice organized this rally to demand fairness and dignity for those workers, and as a result of that, got the council to actually appropriate financial assistance for every single excluded worker in the city so that we're excluded no more. Through the work of DC Jobs with Justice, thousands and thousands of workers who had previously not gotten any help from the city despite losing their jobs like everybody else were actually able to get financial assistance to help them pay their rent, feed their children, pay their bills, and support their families. The economy in DC is rough, right? As housing prices continue to grow, as gentrification spreads throughout the city, housing is less and less affordable. Even a $15 hour job doesn't pay enough, particularly when that job is part-time. So we need organizations like DC Jobs with Justice, both to help make sure people are earning enough so that every worker gets $15 an hour, whether they're a tipped worker or not, so that every worker has access to full-time work and a predictable schedule from their employer, and so that when they go home, they know that they will be going home to a place where their housing is affordable and rent is controlled. And that's why we need Jobs with Justice there to make sure that rent control is real in the district and that every district resident has predictable, affordable rents that they know that their job is going to allow them to pay. Of all the organizations working for economic justice in DC, Jobs with Justice plays a unique role in not only grounding its work in the real life experience of workers in the city, but actually connecting those workers directly with policymakers to bring the pain and abuse that those workers feel directly to policymakers so that it's not a policy paper, it's not just testimony, it's a real life DC resident who's been affected by shortcomings in our policy, telling that directly to a policymaker and asking them to change policy to make their lives better. Income inequality and wealth inequality, particularly between white DC residents and black and brown residents, is not going anywhere. It's getting worse as the city becomes more and more gentrified and more expensive. We need organizations like Jobs with Justice to speak up for workers, to fight for a fair wage, because $15 is not enough, to make sure that tipped workers get a full wage, to make sure that every worker has benefits on their job, to make sure that people can work with dignity and know that they're going to get paid for the time that they put in. And we need Jobs with Justice to be there also to make sure that those workers can afford to live in the city. So fighting for real rent control that creates predictable, affordable rents for every DC resident across the city. It's really fun and rewarding to work with DC Jobs with Justice because they take on some of the hardest issues. They work in such a genuine way, in community, in collaboration, but always try to do it with fun and joy. And it's amazing that what a relatively small organization, the number of places Jobs with Justice is able to show up, the number of policies they're able to influence, the millions of dollars of DC resources that they're able to steer into communities that need help. It's just impressive and admirable, and that's why I'm excited about DC Jobs with Justice, and I think everybody should support DC Jobs with Justice.